Were you born a princess? Obviously. Hi guys, welcome to Ask Princess Pea. This web series is dedicated to answering your questions. So before we get started, I do want to give a disclaimer that I am not a doctor or a medical professional. None of these statements have been evaluated by the FDA. And before you make any changes in your medication, natural remedies that you're trying, or anything like that, I do recommend that you consult with a medical professional on your own. Okay, so let's get to the first question. So on the form, I asked 2 questions, and then I asked them to go ahead and ask their question, and then there's also a consent for the question to be shared. So the first question is, are you currently a cannabis user? And the second one is, do you currently use natural, traditional, alternative therapies, herbs, or supplements? So this person, all these are anonymous questions, by the way. This person said no, but considering it as far as being a cannabis user. And they said no, but considering it as far as do they use any other natural therapies, herbs, or supplements. What would you like to know? So the question is, I have never used cannabis. I suffer from severe arthritis. I take naproxen/Aleve and do physical therapy. I am open to all options. I'm just not sure where to start. Okay, so first of all, thank you to whoever submitted this question, because you submitted it perfectly. You told me your history with cannabis use. You told me what condition you're struggling with. You told me the medication that you take and the therapy or other things that you're currently doing. I would, if I sat down with you, I would like to get a little bit more information on your lifestyle, diet, and other things like that. So the positive thing is that NSAIDs actually work very well with cannabis. They work pretty well together. I'm actually going to share a link in the description. While I'm answering questions, by the way, anything that I say, I'm going to provide a reference link in the description. So if you just look there, you'll get all the information there. I really strongly recommend that you do that so that you can get more information from experts. I am definitely not an expert. So since you've never used cannabis before, my recommendation would be that you actually start small. I would start with something like a topical balm, which is not going to get you high. It doesn't have any psychoactive effects. Generally, there are certain things that you can get, like patches, usually in places that have better, like medical dispensaries that have a larger selection of options that could potentially get you high. But generally speaking, most topical applications will not produce any psychoactive effects because there's just not enough to get into the bloodstream. It's also beneficial for anyone who is at a job where they have to test, take drug tests to keep their employment. Even though I'm adamantly against those forms of testing, they do still exist, and a topical balm is a good way around that. So a topical balm you can use directly on the sites of pain. So like if your arthritis was in your elbows, for example, you could put it directly on your elbows, and it should add it should work synergistically with the NSAID to help with the inflammation, which will help with the pain. You actually didn't mention a lot of pain. You just said arthritis, but I assume that it comes with pain because I have several different types of arthritis and know the pain and frustration that it comes from that. You also said that you were in physical therapy and that you were open to other options. I would actually recommend that you go talk to somebody about acupuncture, which definitely helps people with arthritis. Also, bodywork, massage, seeing a chiropractor is not always a bad idea. For me personally, the chiropractor is just too forceful, and I have too many other issues with my spine and joints. So a chiropractor isn't really, as far as getting adjustments and stuff, just isn't really a practical option for me. But there are a number of people that have had, great relief from seeing a chiropractor. So that's another option. Additionally, if you're open to spiritual healing, another thing that I would recommend is Reiki. Even if you don't believe in the same things that a lot of Reiki practitioners do, which is that you have a biofield above your body. This has not been proven by science at this point in time, but research does show that Reiki and other forms of body work and things along those lines, yoga would fall into that category, do tend to make a positive effect on people dealing with any level of chronic pain. Now, whether or not it's because of the energy from the biofield, which is what Reiki practitioners believe, or if it's just because, not really a placebo effect, but because of the mind-body connection and the fact that with you relaxing your body and thinking more positively, that it does directly affect your body. So if that's another option for you. You actually have a number of options. My recommendation would be to sit down with someone who is either a certified Reiki practitioner, a chiropractor, an herbalist. Let's see, who else could you see? You could also see a wellness coach. There's quite a few of those. But basically just sitting down with somebody to talk about a naturopath, just basically somebody that you could sit down with and talk to about all of your options and discuss each individual option, how they work, and then pick one which might be good for you to try. The good thing about all of these options is that none of them are going to have any negative effects. The only one that might lead to any sort of negative effect is perhaps seeing a chiropractor. I know for me, getting adjustments always led to a few additional days of pain elevated, and before I would be like relaxed. So that's the only one that could have any potential side effects. You didn't list that you were taking any other problematic medications that could interact with cannabis. So if you want to try something if you want to try something on top of a topical balm, then you could start with CBD. That's a good place to start. But if you are interested in starting with cannabis, I would start with a low THC strain. You would want to check with the dispensary that you go that is in your area. I'm not sure where you live. If you're in Maryland, there's quite a few. If you're in DC, I believe that there's 5 total. But you could start with that, or if you live in DC and you're friends with a grower who will share with you, or if you have a caregiver or something along those lines, look for something that's a little low in THC to start, and then sort of build on it from there. I definitely would recommend that when you first start consuming cannabis outside of a topical balm or something that's just CBD, that you start taking it at night first, because with most people, if they're new, that those first few times you get high, for example, could feel a little overwhelming. So it's best that you're at home in a quiet place, have a favorite movie standing on guard, have a friend that can hang out with you, have some good snacks, just be prepared to kind of relax and enjoy the feeling, but also try not to do too much to overdo it. But if you do, just turn on a movie, eat a snack, and lay down. Okay, so moving on to another question. Oh, this one is a long question. Okay, so they are currently a cannabis user. They are currently using natural, traditional, alternative therapies, herbs, or supplements. The question is, there's a lot of questions, actually. It says, can you please explain the endocannabinoid system? I assume that they mean the endocannabinoid system, and the overall impacts of each strain, and over time how tolerance levels rise. What specific components in the medicine cause the munchies? I know ChemDog did not make me groggy. Do you have any tips on matching strains with symptoms and avoiding certain ones? Okay, this is a lot of questions in one, so I'm gonna unpack this one at a time. Can I please explain the endocannabinoid system, as I assume that that's what you meant. That would be a whole video on its own, just explaining the endocannabinoid system, but Leafly has done a fantastic job of making a series of 101s. They actually they have a fantastic article with a video attached to it on the endocannabinoid system and how it works. So I'm going to leave a link for that in the description below, and I would encourage you to check that out if you're interested in learning about the endocannabinoid system and how it works. The overall impacts of each strain. So something that people should understand is that every strain is completely different, and even within the strain, there are different phenotypes of that strain that are different. So there's actually a lot of questions that I got asked about strains. So I'm going to kind of unpack all of those in here. I got at least 3 questions asking me about what strain is good for this or what strain is good for that. So something that you need to understand about strains of cannabis is that it's not really about the strain, it's about the cannabinoid content, and it's about the terpene content. If you're interested in learning more about what THC, CBD, and some of the other cannabinoids do, as well as how terpenes interact. I'm going to leave links in the description box, probably all from Leafly. They actually, I'm telling you, they have an absolutely wonderful series on Cannabis 101. I'm probably going to, like, do a link on our website, like, linking you back to them, because they've done an excellent job for anyone that's new to cannabis to understand the science behind how cannabis works. So, as far as like the overall impacts of each strain, that's going to depend on the strain. So if a strain is higher in THC, it's going to react differently than a strain that's high in CBD. If a strain, you asked about the munchies, for example, so there's a lot of research that indicates that the higher levels of THC is what creates the appetite stimulation for somebody that's like going through chemo or struggles with an eating disorder, or there's lots of other things where the appetite stimulation is great, and it's probably the primary reason they use cannabis. But then for other people, the munchies, so to say, are actually like a really terrible thing that can cause really great harm. Like I know for me, you know, the munchies are not a positive thing for me. They tend to like impact me really negatively, and so I do my best to avoid them. So something that you want to look for is strains that are high in THCV, because THCV suppresses the appetite. So one of my favorite strains for this is Moby Dick, which we harvested last harvest, I believe. And Moby Dick is high in THCV. Unfortunately, we cannot get all of our terpenes tested here in DC because we don't have a lab that can do it. But yeah, so, you know, it really depends on the individual components. It depends on the cannabinoids, and it depends on the terpenes. Let's see. Over time, how do tolerance levels rise? Okay, so this is kind of a complex question because it does kind of fall into how the endocannabinoid system works, but essentially, the reason that you get high, the reason that it has psychoactive effects is because of the CB1 receptors, which THC binds to. THC is kind of like a key. If you picture the CB1 receptor as a lock, the THC acts as a key to open that receptor. Because it is not a naturally produced cannabinoid, because we do have those in our body, we have endocannabinoids, which are naturally produced. And then there are phytocannabinoids, which are the ones that are in cannabis, which are plant-based. So because it's not naturally producing in our body, our CB1 receptors go a little crazy, which is kind of what causes you to have that psychoactive effect. So our bodies are very resilient, just like they are to any other type of medication. So just like people that, there's a lot of issues with people that take so most people have heard about the link between taking too many antibiotics and being antibiotic resistant. It's very similar. So when you take something a lot, then your body naturally is going to learn how to react to it and adjust to it. So a good example of this could be, for example, I have celiac disease, so I can't eat gluten. Now, before I had my diagnosis, I ate gluten all the time, and it didn't make me violently ill, because my body had built up a somewhat immunity to it because I'd been consuming it all along. So inside my body, there were things that were being wreaked havoc throughout my intestinal system. But it took a long time for me and my doctors to actually be able to put the pieces together and realize that it was celiac. So now that I have not had gluten for so long, even small exposures to gluten now make me violently ill. So basically, the way that tolerance works is that as the THC continues to bind to the CB1 receptor begins to sort of not have a crazy reaction to it. It's sort of like recognizing it as like something friendly or something that we're using all the time, and our bodies adjust to that. So just like it does with any other medication, if you've been on any kind of medication or herb for any kind of extended period of time, you know that at some point you've probably had to make an adjustment to your medication. So people that don't consume cannabis every day often don't have the same levels of tolerance that people who do. And unfortunately, while there is a quick fix, which is just taking a tolerance break, for people like myself and lots of other people who have chronic pain and chronic mental health problems and a whole host of other things, taking a few days off of consuming cannabis isn't even really an option for us because of the level of pain. So unfortunately, it's just the reality of consuming every day. If it's becoming something where it's becoming too expensive for you to continue to medicate, then I would recommend that you take a minimum of a few days off just to sort of reset your system, so that you can gain your tolerance again. There's a couple of really good articles that I'm going to share in the description about tolerance. Kim Dog did not make me groggy. Okay. Do you have any tips on matching strains with symptoms? So what I can do is I can share. So if you're looking for something that has a lot of the same properties as Kim Dog, I went ahead and pulled this up online. The link for this is going to be in the description. This is from MCR Labs. This was a sample test that they did of Kim Dog. So what they did here was they showed the cannabinoid profile as well as the terpene profile. So one of the most common things in Kim Dog typically is caraphyllene, and I probably am going to butcher most of these names, by the way, so if I do, you know. So that's the highest level of terpene that's detected, and then here's all the other terpenes that are in it. So if you're looking for a strain that's going to have similar results, then you're going to want to look for strains that contain these terpenes or that match this in cannabinoid levels. So yeah, really all that you need to do if you're looking for strains to match is that you just need to know what you're looking for. So for me, for example, I know that limonene is something that's really beneficial for me for the daytime. It actually helps my anxiety a lot, and sort of allows me to focus, and yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite terpenes. So I look for strains that are high in limonene. I also know that strains that are too strong in myrcene are going to make me sleep, and so I avoid strains like that unless I am just in so much pain that I can't move or I need to take them at night. So what most people hear of as indicas versus sativa, most of the time indicas tend to be higher in myrcene, which is what gives them the sedative effect because it allows your body to absorb more THC, which is what's making you tired. Okay, so moving on to another question. Let's see. Yeah, I got at least 3 different questions about what strains are best for pain relief, so I'm going to kind of address that. There is another video on this channel that I would really recommend that you check out. It's called 5 Herbs to Use with Cannabis. And on there, I definitely recommend a few different terpenes that are good for pain relief and herbs that match those terpenes. Traditionally, you're going to want to look for things that are going to be high in myrcene and pinene. Most people feel the best from pain relief with indica-leaning strains. For me, it's not possible for me to use too many of those during the day and still be a functional human. So I tend to stick with pretty nice hybrids that have a pretty nice balance of cannabinoids. And I medicate differently throughout the day with all different types of medication. And my primary use of cannabis is for pain relief. So some things that I would recommend is that you, and this, I should have answered this with the other question, but if you're interested in using specific strains, what you're really looking for is what cannabinoids and terpenes work best for you. And the best suggestion that I can make to you is that you track your use. If you're one of our Patreons, by the way, our Patreons got a gift with this video, like they do with any video that I produce, for a tracker to track their cannabis use, but you can use a journal or a notebook or anything else. But tracking the reactions that you have and at the dosage that you took a certain strain of cannabis in is really going to help you narrow down exactly what you're looking for and why. Because without having any additional information on your background, the medications that you're taking, what things you've tried, etc., it's really difficult for me to give an answer on a specific strain. So, like I said, my suggestion is that for every strain that you try, that you take note of it. As far as pain relief, I'm happy to give you lots of advice with that. I definitely recommend that you do some sort of physical activity, whether that be yoga or physical therapy. I also recommend that you really focus on self-care and taking care of your mental health, because the link between people having chronic pain especially and suffering from depression and or anxiety with that is really high. So as somebody that struggles with a number of things, I strongly recommend that you consult with a psychiatrist or a therapist, and make sure that you're also, like, in addition to the doctor that you're already seeing for pain management. And I would recommend that you make sure that you're checking in on your mental health in addition to just managing the pain, because I'm about treating the whole person, not just symptoms. So I can give you recommendations for symptoms, but at the end of the day, if you're not treating the whole person, then treating the symptoms is just like putting a Band-Aid over the problem. Okay, so for this next question, I actually reached out to a friend and then did a little bit more research on my own, because cardiology is definitely not my specialty in any way. So this question says, I recently had a heart attack and cannot smoke. Can you suggest a strain that may help my heart that I could use to make edibles? So there's a number of things about this question that raise alarm for me, and I'm going to outline those, and then I'm going to share the information regarding cannabis and heart health. So if your doctor specifically told you not to smoke, my question would be, did he ask you not to consume cannabis at all, or specifically smoking? And that's something that you need to consult with your doctor about. Also, I have no idea what medications that you're on, and there are a number of heart medications and medications that you could take after a heart attack that can interact very negatively with cannabis. So for those two reasons, my recommendation is that you do not do anything with cannabis without talking to a doctor. There are a few doctors who specialize in cannabis treatment, and maybe seek out one of those that could help you out, but I am not comfortable in any way, shape, or form making a recommendation as far as a specific strain that would help you make edibles, because I don't know enough information, and it would be just unethical for me to give my opinion on that. So what I will say, however, though, is that THC does raise your heart rate. It also increases your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone, and both of those things are bad for heart conditions. So additionally, I am going to share one other thing. So this article is on health.harvard.edu, so I would say that this is probably an excellent place to find research. Something you do need to be careful about when you're looking at cannabis research is the links specifically, and to make sure that they're not associated with any businesses that would profit from the information that's shared. That's something that I find a lot when looking for cannabis information, and so looking for something from Harvard, I'd say that this is safe information. So actually this goes and backs up some of the things that we've already talked about, as far as it has some of the strongest evidence supporting the medical use is for chronic pain. So cardiovascular effects. So I'll just read it. It says, one of the few things scientists know for sure about marijuana and cardiovascular health is that people with established heart disease who are under stress develop chest pain more quickly if they've been smoking marijuana than they would have otherwise. This is because of the complex effects cannabinoids have on the cardiovascular system, including the resting heart rate, dilating blood vessels, and making the heart pump harder. Research suggests that the risk of a heart attack is several times higher in the hour after smoking marijuana than it would be normally. While this does not pose a significant threat to people who have minimal cardiovascular risk, it should be a red flag for anyone with a history of heart disease. Although the evidence is weaker, there is also links to higher risk of atrial fibrillation and ischemic stroke immediately following marijuana use. Consistent with these links, studied by Dr. Mukamal and colleagues also suggest that marijuana smoking may increase the long-term death rate among heart attack survivors. So the thing is that even if you were to convert that into an edible, I don't feel comfortable enough suggesting it to you because of that, because of the higher risk that category that you're in. As far as I know, CBD is fairly safe. I would do more research on that, but I am just in no way comfortable making a recommendation. As far as I know, there are no specific strains that help with heart disease. If there's research on it that somebody knows about, please feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'd love to add it to my collection of studies and research. So yeah, That's my answer, is that I strongly recommend that you don't unless you consult with a doctor. Unless your doctor specifically said that edibles would be fine, which I am a little unsure about, then I wouldn't at all. I would look for other methods of treating your pain. I would go back to the original question on this video about helping somebody with arthritis. If you have pain or other issues that you're treating cannabis with, I would look at alternative treatments than cannabis. This is one of those times when it would not be my recommendation to recommend cannabis for you. This question cracks me up because it asks me if my favorite donut is Krispy Kreme or Dunkin' Donuts. I can't have either because I have celiac disease. Although I have heard that Dunkin' Donuts does have a gluten-free brownie, which I have not tried. But pre-celiac diagnosis days, Krispy Kreme took the cake all day. Thank you for the question. So this final question is really interesting because I feel really sorry for this person and I really want to give them a hug, but I'm going to go ahead and read this question and break down some of the things that I automatically see as problematic. So it says that yes, they're a cannabis user, yes, they're currently using natural treatments. The question is, I'm taking St. John's wort, Lexapro, and cannabis daily for depression. My depression doesn't seem to be any better and I feel lost, sad face. Is there something else I can try? So first of all, I really wish that I could come through this camera and give you a hug. I really appreciate you sharing that question with me, and I know how hard it is sometimes to ask for help, so I genuinely appreciate that. I'm really happy that you shared this information with me because I'm wondering if you told your doctor that you are taking St. John's wort before they prescribed Lexapro for you, and if you did, then you need to find a different doctor. So St. John's wort has been used for depression for some time. It's actually one of the more popular natural treatments for depression. Most people have heard of using St. John's wort for depression, but the thing is that it also raises your serotonin levels just like your SSRI or Lexapro is doing. So you're running a super high risk that you could develop serotonin syndrome, which is really rare, but when you combine St. John's wort with Lexapro, then that becomes a higher probability. I never would recommend that somebody who's already taking an SSRI or an antidepressant, there's a few different kinds of antidepressants, Lexapro is an SSRI. I take Celexa personally. It's in the same family as Lexapro, but it's slightly different, and I do not take St. John's wort because of that. That's one of those medications that just doesn't blend well with that particular herb. As far as you're taking cannabis daily for depression, I'm going to do a quick check real quick. So the thing is that while SSRIs generally are safe to combine with cannabis because I do it every day, there are rare instances where they can have an adverse effect to the point where you might not even actually be getting any of the benefits that you might normally be getting from your SSRI. I would need to know how long you'd been on it because that would also make a difference. Just so you know, antidepressants of all time, or pretty much any psychiatric medication, can take anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks to even really start working. So a lot of times those first 6 weeks are hell. I recently went through several medication changes for my many issues, and I can tell you that the last several months before they mellowed out and we actually settled on something were hell. It was absolute hell. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't do anything really. I was just basically in my house doing nothing, in a really bad, dark place. So I empathize very greatly with feeling like you're not getting better and like you're doing something to help it. So something else that I would ask about your situation is I'd want to know what your lifestyle looks like. Do you have any support system in your life? Since you reached out, I'm hoping that you'll watch this video, and I'm hoping that you'll reach out to me. I would be happy to do a sit-down consult with you for no charge, and just kind of get to know you a little bit and figure out what other options might be good for you. I do recommend that if you are getting Lexapro, I don't know if you're being prescribed that from your primary care physician or from a psychiatrist. If it is through a psychiatrist, I would also recommend that you see a therapist, because talking through some of those things is going to help. I also recommend that you do as much that you can socially to try to increase your feeling of connection to a community. That really helps a lot. If you can't get up and get out of the house and the only thing you can do is get on Facebook, then use Facebook as your community. I use social media as my community all the time. And I love you all for it. And I love that you all know that I just take breaks and need time off, and that, I love it. And I Don't think a lot of people that don't struggle with like chronic mental health problems just don't understand how important social media can be for some of us, and just the ability to connect with other adults when we just can't in person. So as far as other things that can help, I'm going to definitely recommend that you stop taking the St. John's wort with the Lexapro. I definitely recommend that you tell your doctor that you're not having a positive reaction to it. They may be able to increase your dosage or change it, or it could be that that particular medication just doesn't work for you. There's a reason why there's so many antidepressants, because every person is different. I would also recommend that you definitely focus on self-care, and yeah, and like I said, I just really want to give you a hug. So I really hope that you reach out to me. Please feel free to email me, princesspea@cannabisdc.org. I would love to sit down with you. If you can't meet with me in person, I'd be happy to Skype with you. Absolutely no charge on me, because I really appreciate that you asked this. It's very personal to share those kinds of things, and the fact that you felt safe enough to do so makes me feel good. So thank you so much for sharing. As far as what else you can try, I'd also need to know specifically what kind of strains you're trying. I know for me, really happy feel-good strains tend to make me feel a little better. Moby Dick is a top one. This Mrs. Buttersworth is a hybrid, but it definitely increases my mood a lot. Just getting sunshine, and if that's really challenging for you, just go sit outside for a few minutes. There is actually a lot of research that says that getting sunshine genuinely does help if you have depression. And I'm not going to sit here and just and tell you a bunch of, cliche, oh, just, this time will pass, and, all that. I know that you've probably heard that before, and I know that it probably doesn't help when you're in the trenches dealing with it, but just know that you're not alone, and that there are a lot of people that go through the exact same thing. Additionally, if you feel that you're beginning to get into a state of crisis, I would strongly recommend that you text the crisis line. If you're really struggling and you feel like you're getting into crisis, I would strongly recommend that you text the crisis line. The number is on the screen, but I will repeat it out loud. You can text RISE or CONNECT to 741-741, and that's in the U.S., and they'll connect with you anytime, and it's great. I've used it several times. There's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. So yeah, that's my recommendation, is that you focus on self-care, that you stop taking the St. John's wort, that you discuss that with your doctor, and you discuss your medication with your doctor. Cannabis-wise, I would recommend that you look for more happy feel-good strains. I definitely would recommend something like some sort of energy or body work. I do find that to be very calming and relaxing, and help a lot with my depression. And also just make sure that you're finding yourself connected to a community. And if you don't have a community that you feel connected to, just feel free to add me. I actually have a group on Facebook. I will share the link in the description box below, and it's a very small support group for people that are struggling with mental health issues. It's not in any way a dramatic group. It's very low-key, very small number of people in there, and you can be brutally honest and share what you're going through, and other people will be happy to talk back with you, and most of the people in there also use cannabis, so feel free to join us. We'd love to have you, and yeah, so thank you so much for watching my first video of this series. If you would like to ask me a question, the link is down below, and I'm going to try to answer every question, assuming that they don't get too out of control, on each episode. So if you're interested in a question, please leave it for me, and I'll be sure to answer. Be sure to follow us on social media, and be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks.